That report by Amina Akram in Johannesburg. For more on this, joined on the line by Gerhard Papenfus, who is the CEO of the National Employers Association of South Africa. Gerhard, thank you for your time with us this morning. What is your reaction as the Employers Association to this increase, but also broadly to just the state of the economy currently in the country?
Good morning, Sibenzile. There's on the one hand, one understands the dilemma Eskom finds itself in, and but that goes with the question is how did they get there, and we know how they got there. So we're not supposed to accept that too easily, although, what can we do other than to accept it? But we need to demand, and we do, from them to change their style of doing business drastically on all levels. 18% increase affects consumers dramatically because this is an item you can't cut it out. You can't cut down on it very easily. So that this will impact on every element of our economy. The price of doing business and the cost for the consumer will increase rapidly. The point is this, a household can cut down on certain things. We can be more economic with certain things. And when the power goes down, well, you don't have lights. That's one thing. But when you talk about business, that's not that simple. If you're manufacturing, the 9 hours a day you're losing in the States, you average 9 hours a day you're losing is not 9 hours. If you're a bakery, for instance, you can't switch off your machines the moment the power goes off. You can't put in a new batch of bread, and then when the power goes off, you just stop there. All that material is lost. So you have to do it long before the time. You have to say, okay, this is time for a new batch, but I can't start it because it won't be finished before the power goes off. So you lose time beforehand.
Yeah.
And then when the light goes on, you start producing. All those material needs to heat up. Now, people in heavy manufacturing tells me you lose double the time. If the power is off for 2 hours, you actually lose 4. And I get that from everybody. Say if the power goes off for 2 hours, it affects that person for 4 hours. So if you lose 9 hours, that's 18 hours.
Yeah.
But that's
the whole day.
That sounds too terrible. No, that impacts him. It impacts manufacturing. It impacts on the wages of the employees. So this is drastic, and you can maybe do some things to mitigate it, but it's very difficult. And alternative measures for electricity is very, very expensive.
Yeah.
Solar energy is simply too expensive for the general consumer.
So what are employers doing, right? What are your members doing now? I mean, it's a state of crisis. We expect, and in fact, are seeing drastic decisions being taken here. Just from your association, what are you seeing happening? Or employers looking to leave South Africa? Perhaps are they looking to close down shop because of all of these issues you've just outlined?
Well, what can you do is, first of all, they fall back to, sorry, I'm interrupting myself. The first thing is, depending on what kind of manufacturing you do, you can fall back to solar. If you have the money, it's very expensive. I know solar. I've introduced it myself at NEASA's head office, for instance. I'm telling you, it's very, very, very expensive. And all we do is air cons and computers and lights. But when you do manufacturing, you simply cannot do it. The electricity that's required for those processes, it's too heavy. You can't do the solar thing. So go to a medium-sized business. You introduce diesel. That's very expensive. That's very expensive. That adds a huge burden to your expenses. But when you go to the small business, what can they actually do? What plans can they make? If you're talking about startups, the normal startup, a guy that doesn't have money, he is getting by initially with the bare minimum. There's not much that they can do. So, you just lose it. They just try their best, but I tell you, it's almost impossible. So the next thing is you're cutting back on labor and labor's hours. Now, I know that business don't want to do that. Contrary to what the allegation is very often, that business look after their employees, and in cutting back on wages and retention is really the last option. So they absorb that to some extent. But there's a point where you say it's just too much. If you lose 2 hours a day, and if it's only 2 hours a day, then you can say, you know what, I'll absorb it. In that 2 hours, let's do something else. Let's clean the shop. Let's do something in that 2 hours, which we would have done in a different time. But when it gets to stage 6, there's not much that you can do. So now it starts impacting on the employee. And when it impacts on the employee in terms of income, it affects not him or her. It affects 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 other people.
Yeah.
So the impact is far-reaching. And we know, and this is the concern we've expressed, that this is an 18% increase, but will that 18% go for the right cause, or will the corruption and the fraud continues? And we know today we're talking about the increase. A week ago, we're talking about the mafia controlling Eskom. Now, did the mafia change their attitude overnight? I don't think so. So the consumers need to demand from the politicians and the executives at Eskom to introduce drastic measures to root out corruption and fraud. This problem is not Eskom's problem; is a political and leadership problem, because it can be solved. It can be solved, but we need leadership.
Just lastly, Gerhard, on the point about everybody really needing to demand again better leadership and an end to this crisis. There's some who hold the view that in fact South Africans are maybe not angry enough about these issues, that we're not seeing people taking to the streets. And of course, people who live in townships who are protesting on a weekly basis, who are blockading roads and all sorts of things on a daily basis would beg to differ. Perhaps it's the middle class that needs to come to the party, and everybody else, businesses included, who need to come to the party to actually say that enough is enough. What's your view on the take about perhaps not being angry enough or demanding that leadership enough at a national level, given just the scale of this problem?
Zimajili, I agree with that 100%. And in an article I wrote yesterday, I started off with saying that we can have two attitudes towards this thing. The one is to just accept it and say, we're glad it's not 32% increase, and we suck it up and pay. But these guys get away with this. And we're talking about price increase, but will they change? In all these years, they haven't changed their attitude. It got worse. The corruption within this place increased. It is said the place is now controlled by the mafia, and we can elaborate on that. So we are not angry enough. And you know what? Unfortunately, business do not have a protest attitude. It's not there yet. In France, when they do certain things, the farmers come in with the tractors and blockade the streets. Now we don't have that custom in South Africa. But I tell you that business will have to get to the point where we that just continue and make other plans, but there will be a day where we simply do not have other plans, and we need to let them understand. We insist that you do something else. And how do you do it? Not only by saying it, and I'm talking to myself now, but to illustrate it visibly. Peacefully, not distracting property, but we need to tell them, filling the streets with thousands of lorries and tractors, telling them, listen, we're not happy. We're not happy that this is happening. And make the criminals uncomfortable, not distracting anything, not breaking down our democracy, but protesting in a way that we can protest. But because this needs protest, this is not good enough.
Gerhard Papenfus, CEO of the National Employers Association of South Africa, on the line there. Thank you very much for your time with us this morning.